In the foggy, windy hills of Britain, where the stubborn waves of the sea crash against the cliffs, there was once a man whose name was intertwined with legends, possessing a power great enough to change the fate of his people. His name was King Arthur. But who was this man? Did he really exist, or was he merely a product of the imagination of time and the people? Perhaps it was a combination of both. All these questions have been debated by historians and researchers for centuries. However, uncovering King Arthur's identity means not only questioning reality, but also delving into the depths of Britain's dark past. The Roman Empire was the mighty sovereign of the Western world, but by the 5th century, the powers of Rome began to weaken and decline. It was a time when the legions responsible for protecting the borders were gradually retreating. The Celts and other barbarian peoples had liberated themselves from Roman rule, leaving Britain in a vacuum. In this period, ancient beliefs and new cultures merged, mystifying the lands of Britain. Arthur's early years were spent in a world surrounded by stone castles and cloaked by forests. Despite being born simply and modestly, the night of his birth, the sky shone with an exceptional beauty. At that moment, among the people in tranquility, it was evident that something was about to change. Even as a baby, Arthur's eyes bore a sadness filled with secrets. According to legends, Arthur's mother, Queen Igraine, remained alone like a priestess before the birth, preparing her soul through deep meditations while waiting for a sign from God. The divine grace appeared in light at the moment of birth, as if the sky was celebrating Arthur's existence. Arthur's childhood, in a sense, took place behind a veil of secrecy. According to many legends, his mother Igraine never revealed Arthur's true identity to anyone. He was not just a child, he was also a symbol of hope and the future, yet Arthur's true identity remained blurred for those watching him. In his own world, he continued to live as a mysterious child, longing to separate himself from those around. He would become the future of Camelot and the savior of Britain. However, no one yet knew when, where, or how this would happen. Arthur's youth was considered the first steps toward becoming a legend among the people. As the legend goes, as he grew, a different power began to bud within him. Natural leadership and courage shone through in the eyes of his people. However, Arthur's heart was still like a star awaiting a reunion. He spent all his youth striving to find the truth, to be noble, and to fight the right battles. Each of his steps seemed to be taken to fulfill a prophecy. But there was something young Arthur did not know. He needed a legendary object to discover his true power and rightful place. That object was the holy Excalibur. One day, Arthur's journey of growth shifted to another dimension. In the depths of a mysterious forest, guided by perhaps a forest fairy or an ancient wizard, he discovered the place where the sword was buried, near Camelot. It was not just a simple place, it was a sacred area known among the people as the Garden of God. The surrounding nature felt as if it was cloaked in a magical cover. The trees seemed to sense the presence of the sword, and the wind sensed the sword's hidden location. Excalibur lay buried in the ground, but there was a difference. The sword awaited only to be wielded by a true leader and to be given to the right person. The stone where the sword was found gleamed like a signal directly winking at Arthur. According to the legend, Arthur could not have the courage to pull the sword without passing a test. He had a fear in his mind. He thought, "What will this holy sword bring to me?" But a force was pulling him from within, and the feeling he had to take the sword grew stronger every moment. The moment Arthur extended his hand, it felt as if time had stopped. As he pulled the sword from the earth, it was as if dark clouds were dissipating. In that moment, a light burst forth from the stone, delivering the sword into Arthur's hands. Excalibur had merged with Arthur's spirit, not only physically, but also with the heroism and sacred duty inside him. This was his destiny. Excalibur bestowed upon him not only power, but also a responsibility. Arthur was no longer just a youth. He had become a leader, a hero, and the future of Camelot Excalibur, once merely a sword, would become a symbol that would ensure peace for Britain, a power shining in the hands of a hero. As Arthur took the sword, the boundaries between history and legend blurred, and Arthur's path transformed into a saga. He was no longer just a man, but became a hero united with his destiny. The power of the sword also enabled Arthur to confront the darkness within himself, for every hero carries their shadow. Excalibur was not merely a physical weapon, but also a symbol of an inner struggle. In that moment, it was not just a test of Arthur's leadership, but a trial of his spirit as well, and he emerged victorious from that trial. As he returned to Camelot, he was aware of the great duty his people awaited. The responsibility of being a king would be tested not only through wars, but also through love and betrayal. The sword would not only bring him victories, but also impose the duty of earning the trust of all his people. Camelot was not just a colossal fortress built from stones. It was a symbol of a vision, an ideal. After Arthur's return, the streets of Camelot were illuminated by the first light in the sky. The determination in his eyes and the glimmer of the sword deeply affected the people. Excalibur had become a symbol, reflecting not only Arthur's spirit, power, and destiny, but also the hope of a brighter future. However, the peace in Camelot was short-lived. Many kingdoms saw Arthur's rise as a threat. From the moment he donned the crown, Arthur found himself ensnared in a great war. The struggles among kingdoms and the fights for the throne threatened the peace of Camelot. But with the power of Excalibur, Arthur had to fight not only against physical enemies, but also against inner and spiritual foes. One night, like a drunken chaos, an invading foreign army approached the walls of Camelot. This enemy was fed not only by swords, but also by dark sorcery. To repel this assault, Arthur summoned his bravest knights at the Round Table. In that moment, magic and steel merged on the lands of Camelot. With the might of Excalibur, Arthur took down heavily armored enemies one by one, each strike becoming a signature that garnered freedom for Camelot and its people. As Arthur continued to live as a symbol of justice and heroism on the peaceful grounds of Camelot, a silent war was raging around the Round Table. This struggle was not fought with swords, spells, or enemies. It was fought on a deeper level, in hearts and souls. Arthur's best friend and most loyal knight, Lancelot, was not simply a warrior. He mirrored Arthur's spirit. Lancelot stood by Arthur in every battle and was in his shadow with each victory. Yet as time went by, something began to change. This was not merely friendship, but also a passion. Lancelot became bound to both his leader and his closest friend, Arthur, not only with courage and loyalty, but with a love hidden in his heart. From the very first days after Arthur's coronation, Lancelot had been a loyal part of his government. However, as time went on, this loyalty caused another feeling to blossom within Lancelot: love. Arthur's wife, Guinevere, was the most beautiful and graceful woman in Camelot. In his mind and heart, the affection he felt for Guinevere settled, deeper than his love for his closest friend, Arthur. However, this love was initially silent, deep, and resonated only within Lancelot's inner world. Guinevere also noticed Lancelot. His loyalty and bravery reflected a light across all of Camelot. Lancelot, whenever they met, always acted according to Arthur's wishes. But within him, another passion, another desire was growing. The attraction between Guinevere and Lancelot gradually brought them together. While Lancelot continued to be Arthur's friend and hero, he also carried a longing that kept him one step away from betrayal. But neither Arthur nor Guinevere realized how deep these feelings were becoming. Lancelot, As a loyal knight and courageous leader clung tightly not only to his respect for Arthur, but also to the ideals of Camelot. Yet the love within him weighed heavily on him every day. Sometimes, when he found himself alone, he would see in Guinevere's eyes something that was the exact opposite of his loyalty to Arthur. Yet Lancelot thought he had to remain completely devoted to Arthur. One day, a feast was held in Camelot. The knights of the Round Table and other guests gathered to celebrate their victories. That night, Arthur noticed a strange silence between Lancelot and Guinevere. As they looked at each other, something was lost in their gaze. At first, Arthur dismissed these feelings. However, as time went on, each glance, each silent moment, whispered something to him. This was not only the distance between a friend and a beloved, but also a hint of a secret. He sensed that something was wrong, but he did not fully understand it. That night, as Arthur lay alone in bed, he reflected on Excalibur as he held the sword in his hand, looking at its shine. Excalibur gave him power, but it also imposed a responsibility upon him. That responsibility was not only to protect his people and Camelot, but also to question the loyalty of his closest friends and wife. In that moment, Arthur sensed a bond between these two individuals, a love, a betrayal, a friend turned into a foe. Arthur approached Lancelot with a question in his eyes. Lancelot, who had served as his closest friend and always loyal knight, was no longer just a man. There was a lost soul in the deepest corner of his heart. Lancelot was caught in a dilemma, feeling he must either betray his friend or his greatest. Betrayal loomed over both of them like a dark shadow. Arthur, standing still and strong as always, held Excalibur in his hand. "This sword gives me the power to defend my people, but when a king loses more than just his throne, what should he defend?" As Arthur looked at Lancelot one last time, he knew a decision had to be made. Arthur stepped toward Lancelot, raising the sword toward the space between them. However, he decided not to draw it to fight. "Do not see this as a battle, Lancelot. This is a test for both you and me." Lancelot shook his head, tears welling in his eyes, as he took the sword. The duel that began between the king and his closest friend was not merely a physical battle. It transformed into an arena where emotions, betrayal, and friendship clashed. The sound of clashing steel echoed in the winds of Camelot's highest tower. As Arthur skillfully swung his sword, Lancelot carried longing and remorse behind each blow. This fight between the two men bore the marks of Camelot's ultimate fall with every strike. However, in the end, one had to defeat the other. With a final strike, Arthur knocked Lancelot's sword away. Both men looked at each other with tired and sorrowful gazes. Arthur approached Lancelot, who had dropped his sword, and said, "Once you were my closest friend, and now you stand at the edge of my sword. But my love for you is strong enough to protect this kingdom." As Lancelot knelt, tears in his eyes, he said, "I have always been by your side, Arthur, but my heart is now only a burden. I must tell you, Camelot, the truth of my love for Guinevere." At Lancelot's confession, Arthur began to question the future of Camelot. Excalibur, once a symbol of protection for Britain and used for the good of the people, had now become a symbol of Arthur's own inner struggle. The strength of Camelot was collapsing alongside the betrayals and wars within it. Looking at his people for the last time, Arthur decided to leave Camelot. As he took back Excalibur and left his people without a sign for his final leadership, a new era began for Camelot. The story of King Arthur concluded unwritten while he lived, but it would continue to live on in the hearts of his people forever. The name of Camelot would impact all of Britain and generations to come. Arthur's name once echoed in stone castles, but now he had become a legend that would live in the spirit of a people. Camelot stood as a symbol of a lost civilization, a time that was lost but would never be forgotten. And so the legend of Arthur came to an end. However, true strength resided not only on the throne, but in the memories and hearts of his people. If you enjoyed my channel, don't forget to subscribe. Stay tuned for more stories like this one.